الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الواصل الحمد بالنعم والنعم بالشكر نحمده على آلائه كما نحمده على بلائه ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنام سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين وصحبه المنتجبين. Praise be to Him who makes praise followed by bounty, and bounty with gratefulness. We praise Him on His bounties and on His trials. We convey our greeting and salutation to the noble Prophet of Islam and his pure progenies. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I asked Dr. Ilahiyan as I walked in, should I present in Farsi or in English? He indicated that since the goal is to reach the younger generation, so I should present it in English, but leave the door open, I suppose, at the end. If there are questions coming in Farsi, we will answer them accordingly. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه وعد الله الذين آمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم. Allah has promised the righteously striving believers to appoint them as His deputies on earth as He had appointed those who lived before. He will make the religion that He has chosen for them to stand supreme. He will replace their despair with peace and security. They will worship the Lord without fear and will not submit to anyone other than Him, and will associate nothing with His worship and His obedience. Surah An-Nur, verse 55. It is a customary when someone is invited to present, to thank the organizers first. So I intend to follow suit. And so I would like, before I start, to thank the organizers for their invitation, and especially Dr. Ilahiyan for making the initial move, which broke the ice, and the invitation came from others as well. Just under a week ago, the Muslim or the Shia world celebrated the birth of the 12th Imam on the anniversary of 15th of Sha'ban. The return of the Imam or Al-Mahdi, the guided one, is not only a rationale that sustains the Shia community around the world, but also it's a goal for the end of humanity. If Imam constitutes or amplifies the foundation of Shia political philosophy, the return constitutes the culmination of what the world would have been had the Imam would have been given the opportunity to lead. A world full of justice, equity, security, etc., etc. It is also a fulfillment of a promise. There is a hadith from Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wasalam that says, if there is only one day left of the world, the life of the world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to extend that day, so that Imam will return and a just government will be established on earth, so that people would understand what they have missed under the guidance of the righteously guided Imam. This is a fulfillment of that promise, where stability, security, peace and tranquility and everything else will come to dictate and form the world. By now, if we have followed the narrative that exists about Al-Mahdi, we understand that the notion of savior, that somebody eventually would come and save humanity from total disaster and destruction, is not unique to Islam or particularly to Shiism. If you go to Christianity, you will see similar kind of narratives. Judaism has it. Even Buddhists and Hindus have similar kind of text. Non-believers, even non-believers, humanists, they have this desire that eventually a day will come where peace and tranquility is established on earth. How they are going to achieve that, that's a different concept, for them at least. But for us, it's quite clear. Shiism, or Shia Islam, has turned the idea around. The concept is no longer an abstract concept that one day Imam will come or somebody will come. It's a living entity. The Imam, the guide, is living here and now, and it's our midst. We may not see him, we may not recognize him even if we see him, but he is living among us, and he suffers our pain. He understands our predicament. He suffers the crisis that we suffer. And he also suffers the inactiveness, what we call the apathy that we have as a Shia community towards the whole concept of return. Let me explain. There are two types of what we call intidar. There is what I call destructive intidar. If you go and read a number of books that we have from different scholars, the person that wrote quite eloquently on this is my old professor, Marhum Mutahari, rahmatullah alayhi. He has a number of articles and books about Mahdi Mawud. And there are others. Ali Dawani and others have written a number of books. This concept of intidar, waiting, there are broadly speaking two types. There is a destructive intidar in which does not expect from us to do anything. The hadith that exists, that the earth will be filled with injustice before the Imam comes, they somehow misconceive this idea that if we stay back and don't do anything, we are helping the return of the Imam. Why? Because we are allowing the earth to be filled with injustice and the Imam will come eventually. This is similar to the understanding that exists in Christianity, the concept of rapture. We don't need to do anything. Not about the environment, not about social justice, nothing to do about poverty, nothing to do about marginalization, nothing to do about war. A rapture is a miraculous concept that will come, and Jesus, within Christianity, Jesus will come miraculously and he's going to fix everything. Shia, within the Shia, the schools that believe that we really don't need to do anything is following suit. That we really don't need. Imam will come eventually when injustice fills the earth, and if we remain silent, we don't do anything, then we are, by implication, helping the return. That has been rejected by a number of scholars. There is a more constructive understanding of the intidar and waiting, and this is the critical issue. What does it mean in our context, living as a minority, whether you call it Iranian minority, Iraqi minority, Muslim minority, Shia minority, whatever it is, living in North America? What does constructive intidar mean in our context? What should we do? Marhum Mutahari once was asked about this, and he said something. He said, imagine, he used a metaphorical kind of example. Imagine you are present and the Imam has returned, and he has established the first cabinet under his guidance. What is his policy statement? What kind of policy is he trying to implement? Whatever you say he is going to implement, you must facilitate those concepts during his absence. And this is the text. برای ما در عصر غیبت شناخت امام زمان علیه السلام یعنی شناخت کامل از برنامه حکومتی امام در زمان حضور، وظیفه و مأموریت خاص ایشان درک مسئله and how do we respond with it. Which means what? We cannot sit on our backsides and wait for the miracle. In any capacity, you are doctors, engineers, professionals, you are obligated to facilitate the return by fulfilling a piece or a component of the broadly policy statement that Imam is going to implement in his life when he returns. And one of the fundamental issue here is the establishment of a morally principled community in absentia here. One of the failures that has happened, and by the way, this goes right across the board. We tend to be engaged and be busy ourselves with the 9-to-5 jobs and paying for the mortgage, paying for the bills and everything else, forgetting about our fundamental principle that as Shia community here, we need to take the bull by the horn and try to establish a morally principled community in this country. Let me give you an example. If we go back to the early history of Islam, a group of 15, 16, 20, 30, not more than that, came to Mecca from Medina and swore allegiance to the Holy Prophet and promised that we are going to go back to Medina and start planting the first seed of what later on to become the first Islamic Ummah in Medina. They never waited for the quantitative equality with the other community members. No matter how few they were, they started working immediately. And it was that dedication that created an image, created a society that others, by looking to that society, in that just the presence of that society attracted them. Because it was a morally principled community. We reached a point in which the Holy Quran commands the Holy Prophet, وَإِنْ اسْتَجَارَكَ أَحَدٌ مِّنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ فَأَجِرْهُ. If one of the polytheists, non-believers, that even at war with you, they want to come to see what kind of community you're trying to establish, give them a chance to come in. That community becomes the role model. What are we doing here? The Christians can be proud of sending people like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and others that spoke truth to the power. What about the Muslims? What about the Shias? When are we going to have our own voices heard? One of the fundamental challenge or difficulty that I have with even this concept of interfaith, the wishy-washy kind of interfaith that we have around, that in our attempt to reject, to become Teflon community, reject the negative image that the community has against us. We are not terrorists, we are not extremists, we are not this, we are not that. We waste our time on these issues. But we have failed to concentrate on the establishment of morally principled. Who are we and what kind of a society they should expect from us? We live in North America. Whether we like it or we don't, back home you call it Shaitan al-Azam, your Shaitan al-Buzur, your Ta'ud. We have a government that possesses the most military power or immense military power that you can imagine on earth. And it has no qualm about using it. We have now conflicts around the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, over 1 year, as a puppet of the United States, over 1 year, literally wiped the Yemeni people out of their history. What did we do? Zilch. Syria going into the 6th year soon. I hope not, but it looks like it. What's the position that we took vis-a-vis Syria? Nothing. Gaza again being attacked on a regular basis. Palestine used to be the goal, the primary objective of our own political understanding. We don't do anything. Iraq dismantled completely. The Shia-Sunni issue that for many years had already settled is brought back because of the fracture that has taken place, and we have a government which is dysfunctional. It doesn't exist beyond the green zone. Now we have Afghanistan, Pakistan, and you name it. What are our own position? What should we do? Who's going to challenge, to create the moral principle and challenge such power? Most of you, if not all of you, possess the green passport. And you consider yourself citizens of the United States. As a citizens of the United States, the Constitution gives you the right to stand up under various part of the Constitution. Bill of Rights, etc., etc. When was the last time we took position? We are afraid. Why? Again, I go back to Mutari's. اگر وضع مسلمانان امروز را با مسلمانان زمان پیامبر مقایسه کنیم، می‌بینیم در قسمت تشریفات ظاهری ما جلو هستیم. Pomp and ceremony, we are good at it. Biggest conferences, all punching the air, biggest number of flags, biggest gathering, etc., etc. آن روز اینقدر هیاهوی جنجال به نام دین نبود. اینقدر علم و بیرق و فریاد به نام دین نبود. اینقدر طبل و کرنا و کوسه حرفا نبود. در عوض چیزی بود که امروز نیست. یک روح ایمان حقیقی در کار بود، یک خلوص و صمیمیتی در کار بود که به آسانی مسلمان از جان خود می‌گذشت، از مال و فرزندان خود در راه دین به راحتی می‌گذاشت. Now, you will be hard pressed if somebody comes to you and say, make a contribution, even pay your khums, make a contribution for Gaza, make a contribution for this, make a contribution for that. We are good at pomp and ceremony. سنگ اسلام رو خیلی به راحت به سینه میزنیم. When it comes to practice, no. We all claim that we are all expert in all the field. Few books, we become expert. Few writing or reading of few articles, you are most learned individual. But come into practice, and this is the spirit, the missing spirit is the one that we have to implement and bring back into our lives during the absence of the Imam, as we are waiting for his return. It's not just waiting for the Imam to return, but we have to be active members of our community. There is a hadith from the 6th Imam that says, on a number of occasions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to return the Imam. But he decides, or Allah decides not to, because you are not prepared for his return. For him to come back and extend his arm and take those who struggle in their path out of the misery and establish what we call the principle of a just government, he is waiting for us to deliver. Not we are waiting for him. The notion that he will come miraculously change everything is far-fetched. Because we have a number of verses in the Holy Quran clearly stating, if Allah wanted to, it would have been very easy for Allah to change things. You need. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. You need to establish, create the right environment for the return of the Imam. If we continue to deal with the normal life, we are unfortunately, going back to what Mutahari says, we are one-dimensional. We cannot address 2 or 3 or 4 issues at the same time. To explain this, if you are a student, if I am a student, the only concern of mine is my studying. My social responsibilities, my ethical responsibilities go out of the window. When I go to work and find a job, hopefully the only thing that I care is to build more, to get more and more money and build bigger houses and more cars, etc., etc. Again, what about the other components of my responsibility, ethical and moral well-being? Nothing. The consequence is we are having now 45%, these are statistics recently out, of children, youth within our own community that are suffering from drug, failure of education, dropouts, prostitution in our children. Fortson School, high school, recently opened a section advising Shia children of homosexuality, lesbianism, that is free country, you can practice it and you can exercise it. And yet, we tried to communicate with the school on behalf of the Islamic Center. We went there as a delegation, we talked, but the only thing that they say, this is the law of the land. During the passing of the law that we could have made a difference, we laid back, waited for somebody else to do it. Institutions fail to deliver. By the way, if they become alcoholic, if they become drug addict, it's not because they are bad. It's because as a community, as a society, we fail to deliver for them and equip them with the right reserve and experience that they can use it to develop and establish who they are. Just read the literature about children and adolescents. When a child reaches adolescence, whether girls or boys, around that critical time, they begin to tap into the reserve, to see how they can use the information imparted to them by their parents, the education and everything else, so that they can close the parameters of the identity. Really, who are they in life? But if right from the beginning, parents have failed to deliver. Why? Because we were busy. I have at least 3 cases now at the Islamic Center that parents have come to me, Mulana, we have a problem with our teenagers. When you trace it back, during the formative period of their lives, the parents should have paid attention to it. They were not there. Why? They were busy working, earning a living, paying bills, and they never thought that kids require attention from the early age. At least I commend you that organizing something for Saturday and connecting them to this language, Persian language and their history, etc., etc. But that is not enough. Thank you very much. You say salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. During the past few days, whichever Islamic centers I have gone to, I seem to have to face with the lack of air conditioning, whether it's this center or somewhere else. So what should we do? If we pose that critical question, if you look at the narrative, Marhum Mutahari talks about it, we have to bring that spirit of Islam back, in which we are prepared to sacrifice everything that we have for the sake of Islam, not the reverse, sacrifice Islam for our own interest. The other narrative is that for us to begin understanding that if Imam comes back tomorrow, are we ready for him? Have we taken any steps in delivering or making the foundation for the Imam to come? If not, then what's the difference between us or anybody else? That's what Marhum Mutahari says, the hayahu and janjan. Otherwise, substance, hardly anything. We really need to focus on this. Our children fail because we have not been able to show them what are the values that we stand for in our society. That's what they need to know. And I hope that these schools such as this, in addition to language, that is necessary and vital to link them to their history, to their culture, and everything else. And by the way, every single colonizer that comes to a particular country, the first thing that tries to rob and strip out of society is the connection to their history and culture. And the only way they can do that, by preventing people, new generations, to connect to that history, rich history, through language. The early settlers, the first generation, say within the Persian community, because their command of English was not good enough, they at least communicated with the children in Farsi. But as you improve, you become professionals, and your command of English is good enough, somehow we fall back and we don't see that it is necessary for our children. Why? Because we can communicate with them well. And as a consequence, language slips through our fingers. And we develop a generation that has no connection with the old, with the history, with the culture whatsoever, because they can't speak the language, either Arabic, Farsi, Urdu, whatever it is. It is critical, but at the same time, these institutions, madrasas or Sunday school or Saturday school, must provide that absolute principle of a community that we really deserve. We need to teach our children to become the role models in this society, not just to follow. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrajat linnas. However they translate it, you were the best, or you will be the best, if you fulfill certain conditions. If you sit with your children, if you talk to them, if you impart knowledge, if you teach them to become critical thinkers, which means what? Allow them to ask questions, permit them to debate, let them understand, you become the role model for them. It's just a small community. If you do that in your own household, few others do it in their own household. Before we know it, this small microcosm that we call it family, connected together, the society is moving in the right direction. The fundamental principle of waiting, the constructive waiting, is to implement what Imam would have implemented had he been around here. These are a lengthy debate about the issue, which inshallah there might be another opportunity. Since, who was the Sister Karwasyan? I think I received, and it was the text that you sent, and she had collected a number of questions from her students that I immediately sent a text message to Dr. Ibrahim telling him that even if nothing else, if there is no other lecture, just focusing on these questions would take more than a couple of hours. So inshallah, I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would grant you the privilege of becoming, inshallah, the role model in this society, because this society desperately needs one. And let's start with the question and answer. I have a few of them. I'm going to start with addressing one or two, and then we see what, if the audience has any questions. I think I tried to balance it with half an hour, 35 minutes, giving myself about 15 minutes or so of addressing questions. So if you could say salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
The first question, چرا امام زمان دو غیبت داشت؟ Well, if we look at the role, to understand why the two غيبة or غيبة, we really need to understand the role of the Imam. In addition to explaining the principle of faith, defending the faith in their own time, the issue of guidance and creating the right institution, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends for him to go to occultation, a smooth transformation of power would take place, was part of it. From 260 approximately to 329, about 69 years, Imam had 4 what we call sufara, or ambassadors, that had direct contact to him and communicated with other members of the Shia community around the world. If you look at what they focused upon during the 69 years, was the consolidation of what we call the role of the religious scholars in the society, so that in the absence of the Imam, people understand the notion and easily would take the responsibility of guiding the community. So during the Sughra, the short occultation, Imam focused, in addition to discharging all of his responsibilities, focused on this notion of how can you establish the basic foundation of a power structure that in the absence of the Imam, they would be able to deliver at least most of the responsibilities that Imam had. And this is the fundamental issue that focused during this period. And also during the longer occultation, for the Imam to be able, one of the reasons our Imams failed, whether Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Hassan or Imam Hussein, and after Imam Hussein, the other Imams really did not take this notion of physical challenge to the established evil, because of the absence of what we call a committed group, dedicated, that would submit to the command of the Imam. And Imam thought that you require a huge length of period for these people to be trained, literally. We have a hadith that says Imam needs 330 dedicated individuals to come back. But what kind of dedication? Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, in one of somebody from the followers of Ahlul Bayt comes from Khurasan to Medina and asks the Imam, says, why aren't you rising against the established Bani Umayyah, or Bani al-Abbas? You have hundreds of thousands of people that are waiting for your command in Khurasan alone. He said, really? What kind of people do you have? So they are waiting for you to just command them. At that particular moment, one of his close disciples comes in. And there is an oven, literally, burning fire. He tells this close disciple, Ya Fulan, go into the oven. And close disciple says, Sam'an wa ta'a, as you command, and walks into it. That person suddenly is confronted with a reality that never came to his head. Kind of speechless, waited for a second, and Imam asked him, are they like this? He said, no. So they are worthless. Then said, Ya Fulan, come out. And he came out, a little bit dusty, but there was nothing wrong with him. For such individuals that an Imam needs, totally dedicated to the establishment of a just society, that they are prepared to sacrifice everything for the command of the Imam, you require the time to gradually be trained and be prepared. None of us, including myself, including even most of the grand scholars, will come close to that level. Because when it comes to the arrow coming to your heart, you are not prepared to take it. Let me give you a story. One of the ulama in Tehran, during the period that I was in Tehran in 1975-76, and he was the Imam of mosque in Khiyabun Muzajumiri. We used to get together in Madrasat Marwi in Tehran, and all the mashayikh ulama would narrate stories. He once said this. He said, we have heard quite a lot about Ashura. And we all say, beginning of this story of Ashura, that Ya laytana kunna ma'akum. I wish that we were there and would have defended you, etc., etc. He said, one night I had a dream. The day of Ashura is there, and Imam Hussein is standing to offer his the salat, that it is a special salat for that unique occasion. And I was there, so Imam pulled me forward and said, Sheikh Fulan, stand in front of me. They are going to throw arrows. You have to protect me by being in front of me to take the arrows yourself. Even in dream. He said, as soon as I saw the first arrows coming, it's not a joke. It's going right through your heart. So I ditched it. And the arrow hit the Imam first. Then I stood again. The second arrow came. I did the same thing. The third arrow came. Again the same thing. Imam pulled me back and said, look, Fulan, it's easy to stand back when you are not tested. To say, I wish we were doing this and I wish we were doing that. Thank you, Lord, that you have not been tested. Otherwise, if you are tested and you fail, there is no other way out. Let's watch ourselves. Unfortunately, these days, we tend to offer lip service to the faith. We are the one who backbite. We are the one who do tuhma. We are the ones that tell lies. We are the ones that disassociate ourselves from our principles. We are the ones that we love wealth and material life more than anything else. And then we stand and we say, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum. This is classic example of hypocrisy and nifaq. So going back to the question, the first period was to establish the whole concept, the notion of transferring of power to rightly guided individuals, the ulama. And by the way, as the Imam himself, as what was reaching the end, he gave the fourth Safir or ambassador a letter that as of tomorrow, you don't appoint anyone. As of tomorrow, it's the guidance of the society is the responsibility of the grand scholars. This indicates the reason why for the first labor, and the second labor was to train, give enough time, ample space for the people to develop themselves. What time is it?
7:38.
7, okay. Is that okay, or do you want the person who asked the question wants to follow up? I will address the second question, and then I see if anybody else has any questions before we go to the list. ارتباط با امام در زبان غیبت. Is it possible? Is it not possible? What is it? There are two grand ideas or opinions here, or two schools of thoughts. There are those who say it's not possible. And they appeal to a single hadith that, again, the letter that Imam gave to the fourth ambassador, that as of today, if anybody claimed that he or she has direct communication with me, they are liars. Those people who say, no, it is possible, they interpret this text. They say the context was fabrication. There were a number of people, because of the whole notion, the way life of the 12 Imam was organized, you have Bani al-Abbas searching, and they understood the notion of the al-Mahdi. They wanted to kill the 12 Imam. From the moment of birth, he was literally being kept secret for 5 years. until the death of Imam al-Askari. And then after the Imam al-Askari, he goes into occultation. There were a number of people who were claiming that they have, falsely claiming that they have direct contact with the Imam. So these people that say it is possible, they interpret these texts into the fabricators that Imam tries to reject. Not the grand scholars, the muttaqeen, the sulaha, urafa, and so on, that through this journey of self-purification, they reach a point in which they have at least some kind of communication with the Imam. During my days in Najaf, it was well known within the ulama that if a grand scholar had a particular question, theological question, that was difficult for him to understand or find an answer, I don't know how many of you have come across Masjid al-Sahla, which is a mosque in Sahla between Najaf and Kufa. It's like similar to Masjid Jamkaran that you have in Qom. Masjid Sahla in Najaf, it's the same kind of, it has the same kind of image and function. Ulama and the scholars would fast for 40 days. And Wednesday night they go to Masjid al-Sahla. They sit and pray, hoping that around Adhan al-Subh, at least a voice will come to them to give them a way out of their theological predicament. And a number of grand scholars have achieved this. So they say it is possible. There's a school says it's not, but there is others that say it is possible. And those who say it is possible interpret the hadith in a different way. And there are different ways that you see, we have to understand. So one of the difficulties that we have regarding communication with the Imam is our perception of what Imam does during Ghibat al-Kubra. Some people imagine or think that Imam somehow has isolated himself in a green island somewhere and has nothing to do with the Shia or the Muslim community. Far from it. Most of the ahadith that we have in this field clearly indicates that Imam is living with us. All our a'mal are presented to him every morning and every evening. This is why there are a number of hadith that reminds us how shameful of us if Imam is living within us and we pretend to be the Shi'as of Ahlul Bayt, and when the a'mal is presented to him, he sees what kind of amal and action we do in our lives. So this notion, if we accept the notion that he lives within our own community, then we can meet him without recognizing him. This is one concept of meeting. Particularly there are sites that Imam every year visits. Arafah, Hajj, Mecca, Medina, and so on. Particularly during Arafat. That Imam is present. You may come across the Imam without recognizing him. And there is a hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu clearly indicating this. It says that I swear by God, the Hujjah, which is the living Imam, will live among these people and walk in their markets and everywhere else. They would see him, but they would not recognize him. Sometimes grand scholars have been able to see a face in, say, Mecca or Medina or Arafat, or sometimes we had scholars in Mashhad or Karbala, that after the incident, suddenly it dawned on them that this unique individual in the midst of the group was so separate from the rest that he did not fit in. So they have interpreted that way. These are the two questions that I have, and then we go to a few others. Let's see if any questions come in from the floor. Yes. Wa alaikum salam.
You mentioned early in your lecture, for example, you said Yemen, what we should do. And I'm trying to confuse, you have many hadith that says to prepare for Imam's return is with patience, and one is to increase our Islamic knowledge. How do you tie those two together, what's going on here? I'm trying to connect what you're saying there.
I'm trying to connect the linkage that you are missing. Could you explain the question?
Well, you challenged us. You said we're not doing anything regarding, you said Yemen, you mentioned a couple other political events and things that are going on here now. How do I tie that into preparing for the return of the Imam?
Well, it's the issue of social justice. You may define it as politics. But it is the issue of social justice. And social justice is the core of what Imam Zaman stands for.
I understand, but I'm asking,
please,
what should we do?
the etiquette requires, I waited for you to finish your question, permit me to finish my answer at least, and then you can come back. So, you may define it as a political concept or political issue. That's your definition. We look at it as a social justice issue. And as a concept of social justice that we are all obligated to defend. كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. There is a reciprocal relationship between the marginalized and the needy, the poor, the destitutes, and those who can defend them and stand for their right. If you look at Khutbah Sheikh Shaqiyya, for example, in Nahj al-Balagha, Amir al-Mu'mineen and other Imams clearly have stated in Khutbah Arafah of Imam Hussein before he goes to Karbala that standing for justice against injustice is an obligation for everyone. If that's the case, we don't need to be scholars or anything else. It's an obligation on us when we see such a wanton disregard for human right and violation of social justice and human dignity, we need to take a position.
Thank you. But I guess I'm trying to understand, you've challenged us that we're not doing anything. What should we do? Tell me.
First of all, I didn't challenge you. I reminded you that you have a responsibility. You may have taken it as a challenge. So I reminded you that during the absence of the Imam, it doesn't mean the door to responsibility being shut. We still have obligations. Number one, the least you can do, to stand up and criticize, write letters, go to your representatives, organize group in front of the Congress, and so we stand shoulder to shoulder with other active members of this community that happen to be non-Muslims. To put pressure. We haven't seen any pressure being put on the US government regarding the issue of Yemen. From the moment that the Saudis declared war on Yemen, United States poured huge amount of weapons into this Saudi Arabia to facilitate the ease of the destruction. Who's paying the terrorists in Syria? The Saudis. What have we done about it? Hardly anything. We say that Palestine and Jerusalem as the second Qibla or the first Qibla of Muslimin. It's being literally dismantled by Zionism. What have we done? It doesn't mean that we have a responsibility when we go to Tehran and punch the air in a secure environment to talk about the United States. Here is the challenge. I gave you the example of the early history of Islam's, the small community that swore allegiance to the Holy Prophet and started working and actively working for the establishment of a morally principled community. You tell me, I'm not challenging you. Let's forget about me reminding you. You tell me, what have we done for the establishment of a morally principled community in the United States? There I rest my case. The next question. The media here in the United States is trying to present it, to wrap it into some kind of cloaked, some narratives that removes it from social justice. It is a social justice issue. It's a violation of human dignity. It's a violation of human right. Whether the attack is against Iran, whether the attack is against Iraq, whether the attack is against Yemen or Somalia or anywhere else. These are issues that we really need to stand up. We try to create a comfort zone and not say anything. Why? Because our own interest somehow supersedes everything else. We have a question here from the sister.
No, no, sir.
Do you have a question?
No, I just have a comment.
Okay.
You said you rest your case. Personally, I don't agree with that. I think this is something that you just mentioned. We have to first of all work on ourselves, our family. So you can't say that, what have you done? Each individual can do their own thing. And there are many ahadiths that say that when we are waiting for Imam Mahdi Ajallah Ta'ala Faraja, we have to be patient, and it will get hard, and it's going to get harder and harder. That doesn't mean we don't do anything. The best we can do, like you said in the hadith that Imam Jafar al-Sadiq asked his companion to go in the fire. That is preparing ourselves. We can prepare ourselves in that way. We don't have to necessarily, you don't want to call it politics, but personally I think it is politics. Yes, it is social justice. It's fine if people want to get involved, but that's not the only way. Like you said, the best way is to first work on ourselves.
Sister, you are talking about two issues that are not mutually exclusive, which means there is nothing wrong for you. As a matter of fact, I alluded to it. We need to become conscious of our responsibility, our individuals, our family, etc., etc. So beginning with yourself, that's the beginning of the process. But that doesn't mean that if you are going to focus on yourself, you should not get involved in social justice either. When you refer to the disciple of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, the type of person that these people were, they gave their life for social justice and for to challenge evil, despite the fact that they were perfect in their own sense. So the notion that we know, as Quran says, نُؤْمِنُ بِبَعْض وَنَكْفُرُ بِبَعْض, we become selective. We become the judge, the jury, and the executioner as to what is right for me to do and what is wrong for me to do. I don't believe there is such a thing that politics, in a sense, in the Western sense, is a construct. Social justice is part of politics. Politics is part of social justice. Making yourself ready for the day is part of politics, which is part of social justice, and vice versa. So this notion, the narrow interpretation in a confine of personal piety, I have to focus upon it until I reach the perfection before I go and do something else, far-fetched. Because if that's the case, then we will not do anything. I think we have a question here.
Assalamu alaikum, Maulana. It's a pleasure to listen to your wonderful lecture again after a long time.
And it's a pleasure to hear your voice after nearly a year.
It's always a pleasure to see another brother again.
I think it goes both ways,
yes,
Mr. Alizadeh.
No, it's our pleasure. I wanted just to bring to your attention the question Brother Kirk asked. He is, mashallah, a wonderful brother. I know this brother, and I don't think his question was a challenge. However, in response to the comment that you mentioned about how we should do something and what we have done, I go back to Iranian text, mashallah, Farsi texts are always sweet. That says, and they can that jam get that one gahi darya shavad. If you look at this community, mashallah, we didn't have this 3 years ago. This is how these brothers and sisters, they started getting together. They organized this place, and this meeting, they brought the children to the masjid, and mashallah, the young kids that you see over here, these are the future Muslim kids of this community. And I think if we didn't have these people with this kind of a commitment that they have to come here, sit down, and the birthday of Imam, listening, mashallah, to Sheikh like you, we didn't have anything to do with Zuhur al-Imam. I think this is the start of that pattern, inshallah. And However, we should not forget, this is different culture. Our children, they have different culture. They are raising in different countries that are totally isolated from the old country. I myself, like Yahudi Sagadan, I'm here 40 years. I started this masjid. The other masjid that you're praying in, also I was there also. But again, it is good to have this kind of meetings and gathering and at least remembering our Islam, our Imams, and inshallah, this will be the future. Right.
I totally agree. Mr. Al-Zaleh, if you remember, I actually commended, I said, I commend the organizers for having this, taking this step. So I didn't leave that issue out. I commended the organizers for the Saturday school for making the effort to teach the children, etc., etc. But I also reminded them, I'm not challenging them, I reminded them that our youth need to be informed. We really need to define who they are in this environment that we have settled. Because we have settled in this environment doesn't mean letting go of our children and not defining who for them, helping them to understand who they are. If you look at the literature about adolescence, one of the fundamental critical questions for an adolescent is who she or he is. What role they are going to play in the context of their life and what plan they should make for the future. That critical issue needs to be imparted on them. So we need to work with them on that issue. I commended the organizers for the work that they do on language and a little bit of religious studies, etc. But there are other components that must be added to it. Okay, what time is it? I think this is going to be the last question because there is a group that I need to get back to the Islamic Center. Stand up, it's no problem.
You were saying that we need to kind of do something about what's going on in our community and try and move it towards a better direction. Can you give some examples as to what we should do to like strengthen ourselves, what the parents should be teaching the children, and like can you kind of put it in a little bit of detail, not just like teach them about this, teach them about...
Sure, an excellent question. You see, first of all, what we need to do, brother, my question is first, or I would like to attract the attention of the parents first. That because as a child you look up to them as role models in your life, so the first question for the parents is to behave as such. So they really have to act like true Muslims. So when you look up to them, you understand. And also, they help you understand that you as an individual in society, you have a responsibility. Now, how do you discharge your responsibility within the life that you have at school? You can start a group of people that when somebody says something about Islam, you stand up. When somebody criticizes a prophet of Islam or something, you stand up. But you equip yourself with knowledge so that when you stand up, you will be able to discuss it with them in the best possible way, the true Islam, what true Islam is. You can organize a few of the sisters with you, a few of younger brothers with yourself, organize a group within the school to defend Islam in any shape or form that you can. As you progress, you become older, then the responsibilities are going to get bigger. As inshallah you go to university, then you have different type of challenges in your hand. When you get older, this is your community. This is your life here. Your parents may have connection to back home, wherever that back home is, Iran or somewhere else. At the end of the day, this is your country. So you have an obligation to fixing it. If we think, and I believe it's immorally corrupt, particularly within the government, we need to do something to fix this country. Bring back morality into it. The only ones that can do that are the younger ones. So you start becoming active at your own schools first. In your own family you can even start first. If you see parents not behaving well, you can tell them, remind them. Say, look, Dad, Mom, You talk to me about, say, moral behavior. I mean, this is not acceptable. And then gradually move forward. But educate yourself so that you can defend whatever you stand for. It's a gradual process. But the sister said it's correct. You start from yourself, but it is not, should not be interpreted that while I'm trying to fix myself, I have no obligation towards the others. They go hand in hand. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.